Okay, Parshas Pinchos. So in this week's Sadra, following the saga of the daughters of Selofchad, who famously complained because they were daughters and therefore they weren't going to automatically get a portion in Eretz Yisrael, it was a whole Parsha. Following this Parsha, Moshe Rabeynu davens to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He asks Hashem to appoint a new leader. Following Moshe Rabeynu's Petira, after Moshe Rabeynu moves on from this world, Moshe Rabeynu davens to Hashem that he should appoint the right type of leader. And the Psukim detail Moshe Rabbeinu's request. So let me take you through the Psukim just for a minute to build up to a question. Yifkaid Hashem Elekei Arucha is l'chol basa isha la'eda. Hashem, the source of all breath, of all flesh, should appoint someone who's going to look over the Eda, look over the community of Klal Yisrael. And Moshe Rabbeinu details, Asher Yetze Lifneim, Asher Yovel Lifneim, Asher Yotziem, Asher Eviem. He has to be a proper leader, one that's going to take them, lead them in, lead them out. And Rashi explains that what's going on in the depth of Moshe Rabbeinu's words over here is Moshe Rabbeinu is turning to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and he's saying, Rabbeinu Shalom, you know that all of Klal Yisrael are different individuals and every person is different and unique. Manei aleihem manhig shehei soivel kol echad ve'echad lefi dato. He says, Moshe Rabbeinu to Rabbeinu Shalom, you know, Hashem, you really need to appoint the right type of leader who's going to be soivel, every person according to them, who's going to understand how to deal and how to connect with all the different individuals that make up Klal Yisrael. Furthermore, when Moshe Rabbeinu details the type of leader that we're talking about, says Rashi from the Medrash, not the types of leaders that are the couch generals that will sit at home and decide the battles that need to be fought, but not actually lead them. No, it should be a person, a leader who's willing to go out there on a limb, out there in front and center of all battles. In the same way Moshe Rabbeinu says, like I did, like Yehoshua did after him, like Dr. Melech did in historical fact. So Moshe Rabbeinu in this Tefila is very specific to HaKadosh Baruch Hu of the type of leader that's required to lead Klal Yisrael. The question that has bothered me for years, I'd like to try and answer tonight, is why is Moshe Rabbeinu davening this Tefila at all? What? You think Moshe Rabbeinu, if he didn't daven for a new leader for Klal Yisrael, what, Hashem might forget to appoint one? I mean, how did Hashem even get to Moshe Rabbeinu in the first place, right? Burning bush, etc. Hashem sought him out. You don't think Hashem can seek out a new leader or replacement of Moshe? Why is Moshe Rabbeinu davening for this? It's always bothered me. And even if he has to daven, but to go to such a detail, such a level of literally thought through, Rabeynu Shalom has to be such a type of man, has to be such a type of leader. Why is he getting busy with the detail? Rabeynu Shalom sort it out. That's the first question. You know what? Furthermore, Rashi tells us the background to why Moshe Rabbeinu came to daven for this was, as I mentioned, coming off the story of Selofchad, of Bnei Selofchad. Says Rashi, when Moshe Rabbeinu heard HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided to let the daughters of Selofchad have a chelik hanachla, inherit their father's portion, Omar, Moshe Rabbeinu says, Higia Ashar she'et batzorki, my time for asking for my inheritance has arrived. That sheyirshu bonai es gadlusi, that my children should inherit my gadlus, meaning my position. So Moshe Rabbeinu, Onov Mikol Adam, and he's worried about his legacy, he's worried about his children taking him over, wants to find a stella for the boys. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu is worried about. We're talking about hailing Moshe Rabbeinu here. What is he doing? I'm not finished yet. When the Rabeynu Shalom answers Moshe Rabbeinu and tells Moshe, listen, Yehoshua, Kach lecha Yehoshua ben Nun asher achba. You know what, Yehoshua, he's the chosen one. Go with him as a replacement for you. Rashi quotes the Medrash, but Rashi doesn't quote the full text of the Medrash. The part that Rashi doesn't quote of the Medrash in Tanchuma says as follows. The Rabeynu Shalom says, Moshe Rabbeinu, Banecha yoshvu lahem v'lo yosku b'Torah. Your children didn't sufficiently learn Torah, whereas Yehoshua, who served you, he's more befitting to be the leader. Quite the indictment of the Medrash on Moshe Rabbeinu's own children. They didn't love enough Torah. But hang on. You think Moshe Rabbeinu, as a qualitative father that he absolutely was, You don't think he knew that? Do you not think he realized that his children weren't quite up to the task? And yet still he asks Hashem, hey, please Hashem, give my children a job. Let my children take over me. It's a pele awesome. Those are the questions I want to try and answer. So we're going to build the answer in two parts. And the first part of the answer, we're going to zone out of the detail of this Parsha. I want to talk about the topic of Tefila, more broadly. The age-old question that's discussed by Sforim, the Sofrim galore through the centuries is, what is the point, what is the purpose of davening? We know, and we've said this many times together, but we know from basic emunah and bitachon in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem has a plan, Hashem knows what's best, Hashem always thinks, whatever Hashem does, that kol mador, everything Hashem does is for the best. Even if it doesn't look like it, even if it doesn't feel like it, everything Hashem does is for the best. We know that. So why are we bothering to daven? Rahman al-Islam, someone's ill, and we say to the Rabeynu, oh, please heal him. Hang on a second. You don't know what's going on in that person's life. You don't know what averas that person's done. You don't know what Hashem's cheshbonos are. Hashem's decided the best thing is for that person to actually be ill. So why are you mixing your nose in? For what purpose? Now, we're not going to do justice to the topic. Because, as you imagine, to get into Tefillah properly and answer this question with all the different opinions takes a number of weeks of shiurim, okay? But I want to draw on one or two principles that will help us circle back and understand what Moshe Rabeynu is doing in this week's Hydra. The Gemara Sanhedrin Mendalad or Madalaf expounds on a posuk in Tehillim. The posuk in Tehillim is Kuvav Lamed, and the posuk talks about Pinchos. Pinchos, who was the beginning of this week's Hydra, and actually the end of last week's Hydra. As we know, Klal Yisrael, unfortunately, the end of Balak, they ended up doing Znus. And there was a big Magefa, a big plague. Posuk in Tehillim says, Vayamoid Pinchos vayifalel v'atiyotza Magefa. Pinchos stood vayifalel. This word vayifalel sounds awfully close to the word vayispalel, and he davened, but it's not quite that word. So the Gemara Mendalad or Madalaf in Sanhedrin picks on that. Omer Rebbe Loza, vayispalel nema elo vayifalel, melamed she'osa pelilus in koinoi. What you see from this word vayifalel, says the Gemara, is that Pinchos conducted an argument. He was pleading a case to the Rabeynu Shalom. This isn't just a tefillah, this is a tefillah where the Pinchos really, as the Gemara goes on to say, he threw down in front of Hashem, and he says to Hashem, what's going on? Why are people dying? Surely Pinchos is pointing to the action he took. He killed Cosby, Zimri and Cosby. Pinchos davened forcefully to the Rabeynu Shalom, Hashem, surely this plague has to stop. That's the nature and the feeling of the tefillah that Pinchos davened in that moment. And indeed, following his tefillah, the plague stopped. So Rabbi Yisachar Frand and other darshanim draw the obvious observation from this Gemara. Hashem wants us to daven. He wants us to express to him what we think should happen. Now, not because we're all self-righteous and virtuous and we think we know best. Okay? Because obviously we don't. And especially when we're up against Hashem, Hashem knows best. No one's denying that. But the Sefer Korim points to this value in Tefillah, that through davening, for a particular outcome, the person who davens for that outcome engages in tefillah with passion, with conviction, and really gets behind his request, that in turn will change the person who's davening. And I'll give you a very simple example of it, but to as I say, to make it relevant across the board will take a bigger share. But just imagine a spiritual request, for argument's sake, because it's more easier to imagine. So you davening to Hashem because you really want to succeed in a particular type of learning that you're doing, a particular type of growth that you're looking towards. Well, if you're davening for something, you're putting your heart into it, essentially what you're doing is you're attaching greater conviction to where you want to be. And that will enable a person to reorient themselves in that direction. So the very process of davening will enable the person who's davening to grow. And the fact that you grow will serve as a schus for you, Be'ezah Hashem, that the tefillah should be neskabel. That's one viewpoint of the Sefer Korim. And as I say, the tefillah has to be heartfelt, it has to be true. The point, though, is that the Rabeynu Shalom wants us to pick an outcome that we think is best. Not because we're foolish and think we know better than Hashem. But as far as the human mind goes, Rabeynu Shloilom, this guy's not well. Poor wife, poor family, poor whatever it is you want to point to. As a human being, as a yid, as a fellow person in his shul, I want to make him better, Rabeynu Shloilom. Please, give him a refuah shalema. That's the type of tefillah Hashem wants us to daven. To express with sincerity, Rabeynu Shloilom, we want a particular outcome. You see, aside from the growth point, there's an even simpler truth that's apparent in the fact that Rabeynu Shloilom wants us to daven in this way. It's got nothing to do with whether we change or not. Nothing to do with whether we grow or not. The simple fact is that the Rabeynu Shloilom wants us to talk to him. The Rabeynu Shloilom wants us to ask. He wants us to talk. He wants us to share. He wants us to plead. He wants us to connect. The Rabeynu Shloilom runs the world in a specific way that we are always needing something, so that we continually turn back to the Rabeynu Shloilom. Parnasa, give us health, and success in this and success in that, and there's this problem to solve and that problem. Talk to him. The Rabeynu Shloilom is giving us issues, giving us problems, giving us challenges so that we talk to him. And when we talk to him, how are we talking to him? Are we turning up and saying, yeah, you know, Moshe, I know you do everything you do for the best anyway, so I'm not really sure why I'm saying this anyway, but you know, there's a guy down my road, he needs a bit of help with Parnasa, can you help him out? That's not talking to the Rabeynu Shloilom, that's not requesting from Hashem, that's not meaningful, that's not purposeful. The Rabeynu Shloilom wants us to argue with him, so to speak. The Rabeynu Shloilom wants us to convince him of our case. Hashem, please, we really get behind this, we really think this is an outcome that's right. Obviously, within the context that we don't know what's best, and if Hashem decides to do a different outcome, then we're okay with that as well. We're not like all in and dependent on our tefillah being accepted or else, no. But the way we approach davening is meaningful, it's heartfelt, it's something that we really want. That's how the Baruch wants us to daven. You know, the Gemara says, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu make our imohos akaros? Why were they barren? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu likes the tefillah of tzaddikim. That sounds a bit cruel. But that's the case for every single difficulty we have. Every single challenge we're in, Hashem wants to hear from us. I'll tell you very briefly, there's a story I heard from Rabeynu Kellerman, Eretz Yisrael, and he was once in Miami. It's such a shocking story. He came across this 18-year-old boy who was extremely, extremely sad and depressed. And he says to the boy, what's the problem? What's going on? So they had a chat, and he said that his father had recently remarried, and had remarried to a stepmother who, in classic terms, was a wicked stepmother, and said that she didn't want any previous children from the previous marriage to be around. So the father, a wealthy guy, comes to the son and said, look, you know, sorry about this. I'm going to give you 3 things, okay? Here's the keys to a fully furnished high-end apartment in Miami downtown. Mortgage is all paid, it's all yours. Here are the keys to a fancy brand new sports car outside, yours to keep. And here's my credit card. You can use it unlimited. Just one thing I ask you, don't ever talk to me again. And Rabeynu Kellerman's talking to this kid, and this kid's depressed. And Rabeynu Kellerman says, well, you've got everything. Yeah, he's got everything. But the most important thing he doesn't have a connection to his father. The Rabeynu Shalom doesn't want us just to have everything, because then we'll never talk to him another day. We'll say shkoyach every now and again. Oh, Rabeynu Shalom, I remember, I won the lottery, shkoyach. The Rabeynu Shalom wants us every single day, 3 times a day, to reach out to him, to talk to him, to connect to him, because that's what Rabeynu Shalom wants. He's our father. He wants us to connect to him. The Messiah Shalom describes Tefila as ka'asher yedaber ish ore'ehu, like a person speaks to a friend. You know how you chat to a friend? When you have a meaningful conversation? You know that sense of connection, the sense of trust, the sense of sharing and caring? That's how the Rabeynu Shalom wants us to daven to him. Because what's the alternative? So we don't daven with such passion and conviction and without all that care. Let's say we put ourselves in the mindset of, oh, I'm a big Baal Bitochen. I don't need to change the world because Hashem, whatever Hashem does it for the best. Let's say you subscribe to that, at least pretend to subscribe to that. You know what life becomes? You know what you become like? Apathetic. Who cares? So if someone's not well, they're not well. Hashem knows what's best. So Yenem lost his money. So Yenem needs parnasa. Okay, so what? That's not how the Rabeynu wants us to function in this world. The Rabeynu wants us to care about ourselves, about others, about real needs in life. Hashem wants us to care. So if you're supposed to care, then daven like you care. The final point within this building block of Tefillah that the Sefer Korim says is that when Hashem does change his mind, so to speak, and Hashem does change the Gzeirah, don't credit yourself with having achieved that with your Tefillah. Because what's really going on is, yes, you davened, okay, you did your part, but it was Chaste Hashem. It was the mercy of Hashem that engineered a different outcome. So all your Tefillah did, good that it was it triggered Chesed Hashem, and Chesed Hashem enables Hashem, so to speak, whatever this means, to have second thoughts, to say, you know what, let's change the din, and we'll change the outcome. One of the things that really grate my nerves when people, Chol Islam, were ill, especially during COVID, and then everyone goes around clapping themselves on the back. We did it, we davened, and we got the guy better. Who do you think you are? You davened. You did a great job by davening, believe me. Hashem's giving you schar in my bar for it, but you didn't achieve anything. The Rabeynu was in charge of this world before, he was in charge of the world after your Tefillah as well. What your Tefillah might have done is it tipped the scales in the person's favour with enough chesed v'rachmim. Hashem decided to change the din. That's not you. Okay, this is the first building block. Okay, fine. Tefillah, great. Let's come back to Moshe Rabeynu for a second. You know what? First, let me just quickly recap. In Tefillah, we've established that Tefillah is supposed to be a form of fighting with Hashem, not fighting literally, obviously, and not arguing with Hashem like an argumentative person would. No. It means caring about something enough that you're davening for a particular outcome. That's what Tefillah is supposed to be. And Tefillah has the potential through davening for a particular outcome to change us. And we said even simpler than changing us is the simple truth that connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, sharing with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes to the heart of what Tefillah is about. Hashem, our Father, wants us to talk to Him and wants us to talk to Him in a meaningful way. Back to Moshe Rabeynu. There is a mind-blowing Sav Sofer who has a lot of different points that he makes on these few psukim in the Parsha. We're not going to go through them all. But I just want to bring out one or two because it changes everything about this Parsha. In the preceding pasuk, before the Parsha begins, the Rabeynu tells the following thing to Moshe Rabeynu. He says, following Aaron HaKohen's Ptira, says Hashem, Chov Zayin Yud Gimel, V'ne'esavto el hamecha gamoto, ke'asher ne'esav Aaron Achicha. You, Moshe Rabeynu, are going to be nifta, like Aaron Achicha was nifta. Says Rashi, at this point, Mikan shenis'ave Moshe ne'misosa shel Aaron. From here, we see that Moshe Rabeynu was jealous of Aaron HaKohen's Ptira. Says Iksav Sofer, what was Moshe Rabeynu jealous of? He says like this, Aaron HaKohen had the benefit that in his lifetime he saw that his role of kahuna was passed on from father to child and his child took his place. Moshe Rabeynu was not going to have that zchus. Furthermore, Ksasov doesn't bring this, but others do. We don't have time to get into it properly, but the Pasuk in Shoftim, Yud Ches Lamed, says Yonasan ben Gershom ben Menashe, and the Gemara in Bava Basra tells us that Ben Menashe is actually Ben Moshe. The word nun there is wrong. That the grandson of Moshe Rabeynu served Avodah Zarah, like Menashe. Moshe Rabeynu did not have a gewaldige legacy to be proud of when he was leaving this world. He could not look at his own children and descendants and know for certain that he's left behind. And you may ask, so what? I'll tell you why. Says Iksav Sofer, because when a person brings up a child and the child follows in their way, then they can be confident that even after they leave this world, they will get continued schusim because the child is continuing in their way. And that's what Aaron HaKohen had. But Moshe Rabeynu couldn't have that confidence. So when Moshe Rabeynu saw Aaron HaKohen's Misa, he was jealous. He was jealous of that which Aaron HaKohen was leaving behind. The Rabeynu tells him, Moshe Rabeynu, you're going to die like Aaron HaKohen dies. You know what Moshe Rabeynu hears in that moment? Oh, maybe the Rabeynu is giving me an opening over here. And Hashem is saying like this, in the same way that Aaron HaKohen leaves this world and has children afterwards who will continue his chusim, so too I will. Oh, if that's the case, as Iksav Sofer, Moshe Rabeynu jumps to the opportunity, Yifkoid Hashem Elokei Aruchas, my child, please put my child in my place. So when I leave the world, my child can also be the leader of Klal Yisrael. What's his intention? His intention is to generate chusim. And we have to add to this that the Shari Aaron brings those who say, Iksav Sofer himself doesn't say it, that included in Moshe Rabbeinu's tefillah in that moment was, I know my children aren't that roy, but Rabbeinu Shalom, do what you can, intervene to make them roy, make them befitting. Moshe Rabeynu saw an opportunity in the Rabeynu Shalom assuring him that his death will be the same as Aaron, to daven that his children should follow in his ways. And that's why Moshe Rabeynu chose this moment to daven that his child should take his position. This turns everything around. First of all, because of what we established and how Tefillah works, Moshe Rabeynu was the leader of Klal Yisrael. It was right for Moshe Rabeynu as the leader of Klal Yisrael to have an opinion about what type of leader Klal Yisrael are going to need. And therefore it was right for Moshe Rabeynu to turn to Hashem b'tefillah and say, Rabeynu Shalom, here, I've worked this out. Klal Yisrael need kach v'kach for a leader. Please ensure, Rabeynu Shalom, maneh, appoint a leader that will take care of Klal Yisrael in the way I've described. And we asked, what's Moshe Rabeynu doing here? Poking around in Rabeynu Shalom's business. Hashem appointed the first leader, he'll appoint the next leader. What are you worried about? No. This goes to the heart of what Tefillah is. The Rabeynu Shalom wants us to take a position. The Rabeynu Shalom wants us to be engaged in this world, to have an opinion, to say, Rabeynu Shalom, I really feel that this is right. I really feel that so-and-so should become better. I really feel that so-and-so should be matzliach. I really want myself to be matzliach and parnasa. What do you mean you want? You don't believe in Hashem has the best interests at heart? Like we established. Yes, of course we know Hashem has everything. Hashem does everything for the best. But that doesn't stop us taking a position, arguing for a position, and telling Rabeynu Shalom why we really feel this outcome should be different. And Hashem wants us to do that. So there's no chiddush at all that Moshe Rabeynu took this moment, first of all, to daven for a new leader for Klal Yisrael. But I think what's interesting from the Ksav Sofer is, because our second question was, Moshe Rabeynu was davening for his own child to take over. Isn't that a little bit nepotism? It's a bit weird. It's a bit strange that he's davening for his son to have a shtela. Like, what's that all about? No. Moshe Rabeynu is concerned for his chusim. Moshe Rabeynu sees an opportunity here where the Rabeynu Shalom seems to indicate to him that there's a hamshocha in the same way that Aaron HaKohen is going to have a hamshocha. And Moshe Rabeynu leaps to that opportunity and says, oh, Hashem, help my children to follow my ways. You know what Hashem answers him? No. Kach is Yeshua. Actually, it's not going to be your child taking this position. It's going to be Yeshua. But don't worry, says the Ksav Sofer, about your continued chusim. Because if you have a Talmud, the Talmud is like a son, and therefore your Talmud will propagate this chusim that you wanted your own child to propagate. By the way, in brackets, it's a gewaldige chizuk, for we can only do the best we can as parents. We never know what's going to happen with our children. So what happens if a person's in a situation where he tried his best, but his children aren't following ay. As long as you're making an impact in this world, as long as you have people who are learning from you, through your mitzvahs, you're making Kiddush Hashem, you're making an impact, they will be your continued chusim. Just in brackets. But just to come back, we asked questions about why Moshe Rabeynu was positioning himself in this way to daven for a new leader, and I hope that with the Yisodus of Tefillah that we've shared, and the Ksav Sofer that we've shared, we now have a new appreciation, first of all, for what Moshe Rabeynu was doing in the Parsha, but most importantly, we have a new appreciation for what Tefillah is doing. And for what the Rabeynu Shalom wants us to do with Tefillah, and how the Rabeynu Shalom wants us to be engaged in Tefillah. And most importantly of all, for us to engage with HaKadosh Baruch Hu through Tefillah, like the Mesilas Yesharim says, Kasher Yidaber Ish El Re'ehu, like we should see the conversation with HaKadosh Baruch Hu like a conversation with your friend. Not in a disrespectful way, but in a friendly way, in a personal way, in a way that you feel connection and you walk away from Tefillah enthused and inspired from your connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu.